Okay, nice. So I don't even really know how to. I don't know if you're supposed to look at the camera and say hi to prospective viewers.
How's it going?
My name's Waz. This
My
will
name
be.
is...
You can.
You're interrupting me already.
Sorry.
We're going to get our
Interrupting cow.
Yeah, my name's Mark, and we're trying to start a podcast, or whatever this is going to become.
Yeah.
I think, dude, let's maybe start for you and I talking about what this is to us.
Sure. Well, to give some folks a bit of backstory, Mark and I have been friends for like about 3 days now, and I just really like his vibe, and I don't feel triggered when I'm around him. And we kind of, it's one thing that we've always, I'm sure everyone has that out there. They've got one or two friends or a group where when you're always together, you have these amazing conversations. That they're organic, they flow, they're not forced in any way, shape, or form. And I think Mark would agree. This is something that we wanted to try and just capture and share with friends of ours, family members, random strangers sitting in another country that we don't even know, and see if some of the things that are important to us or that trigger us maybe resonate with those people.
Yeah, and I think what you raise is a good point indirectly, is that it's when conversations are like organic, and you get in those conversations with those people, and it's like they're waiting to respond. They're not even listening to you.
100%.
And we know people like that, and I think everyone does. So when you find someone you can just like talk to, and like I talked to you before this podcast, it's this whole lost art of conversation, just talking.
Yeah.
With this instant gratification, everything's got to be like 30 seconds. Just having a long conversation and meaningful conversations, and where we don't necessarily agree, but we can have a civil conversation.
Definitely.
On things like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know that the center theme, which we'll probably get to, is around like geek-based stuff and comic books and all that kind of media around that. But I do think we're not going to limit it that much. We're not sort of like afraid to branch out if we occasionally, if this turns into something. Yeah, dude. So I think that's it in a nutshell. That's us. We'll probably chat more about ourselves as it goes on. And
definitely life experiences and things that resonate with us. And I think going on to what you were just talking about, I think both you and I are quite heavily entrenched. I won't even say in the geek community. We're heavily entrenched in the comic book community, comic collecting, comic reading. I know as just now I'd like to touch on I suppose the why comics, what it was, what it means to both of us, and exactly on point what you said. We're going to branch out from there. We want to talk about the movies that are coming to fruition from there.
It's funny you mentioned that. I actually wanted to bring that up. So I think a lot of what we want to talk about will intertwine. And I don't know if you want to jump straight into that, where I'm going to bring forth the topic, whatever, and I'll ask you to interject. But
object. No, I'm kidding. Go for it.
But so what I wanted to get to is that like when I was younger, funny enough, and I know we've talked about this, but we're going to talk about it for the sake of the podcast. It'll come up a bunch of times, all right? But when I was younger, my parents didn't really buy me comic books. I don't know why. I don't know if they thought it was evil. I don't know if it's because I grew up in a small town and they weren't there.
What about availability?
And that's a big thing. I think it was availability. Back then, I think comics might have, if we were lucky, were in CNAs. And maybe it just didn't cross my parents' mind. But I had old school video games, and I remember it was a big highlight when I upgraded to a Sega Saturn. I used to play all these arcade
What were you on before the Saturn?
Man, what's those little things called? The cartridges?
Oh, the Ataris.
Yeah.
With the little joystick, the red button. Got you?
And on those,
And for those kids at home, it used to plug into an old cathode ray tube TV that you'd have to tune one of the channels in just to receive that.
Yeah, for sure. and that's the thing, and then it was also mini arcades for me, and that's when I got exposed to the X-Men arcade games that I'd play with Gambit, and he'd be so all over the place, and and he wasn't the strongest character, but he's just so damn cool. And then a bit of that, we talked about, for me, it was also TV shows like Biker Mice from Mars and a little bit of Turtles, not so much for me, but Street Sharks and Beast Wars. And then I know I'm all over the place now, but my gran would go overseas and she'd give me these Batman figurines, and that was forever a Batman fan. And now I know that they were actually the Batman animated figures. You know,
There we
like
go.
I didn't know that back then. Like, they
You
were
just never saw the
toys.
cartoon.
Yeah, and
Right.
and then I started seeing bits of cartoons and stuff, and only later did I get entrenched in like the whole comic world.
Yeah.
You know, and the whole community and everything. And I don't know if you want to. You'll see this is going to somewhere specific, but I don't know if you want to just touch on how you got into it, how you grew up around it.
Sure. Yeah, similar to you, except I think I had a bit more access and availability to some of that stuff. Not so much in the CNAs. Before that, even, I grew up in an area and we had those typical, you hear people joke about it, like it was either a Portuguese run or a Greek person run corner cafe, where they would sell some vegetable stuff, the milks, the breads, and a whole assortment of other things. And they, right in the front, as you walked in, had an old school style metal mesh comic book rack.
Wow.
With comics just stuffed on the rack, and you'd spin it, pick up random things. I can't even remember what they cost, but my dad every now and again would come home with a couple of these random comics for me, and none of them really stuck so much. I had them in my world, but never gravitated towards any particular character. And I think it was the first time I remember actually actively seeking stuff was when I saw the first Batman movie with Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
I had the soundtrack on a cassette tape that I would listen to over and over. I had caps with the Bat logo on, T-shirts with the Bat logo. And then soon after that, it wasn't even the Batman animated show. I remember vividly waking up one morning and on the TV was the X-Men. The X-Men 90, I think it was X-Men 92 or whatever year it came out. And that just blew my mind. The theme, from the theme song to just every character. Everyone knows it. And one step over it for me, it was Wolverine. There was just something about the look, the aesthetic, the bad attitude, whatever. And I remember that day, as soon as that cartoon ended, found my dad and I was like, I need Wolverine comic books, and he had no clue what I was talking about. Went for a little journey mission around and found a store back in the old days in Norwood area, Phantomania back then, and that's where I met one of my, still today, best friends, a guy named Roy, RJ Benjamin.
Yeah.
And Roy was in the store, and back in school, Roy was on the sort of like on his own kind of a mission, and I quickly was associated with like the jocks playing sports, rugby and soccer, swimming, all that stuff, and I was lost. I had no clue what I was doing, and he was already a fay with all stuff he'd been collecting for a few years, and
Wow.
orientated me, took me around the store, told him what I was looking for, and he helped me find a couple of comics with Wolverine in, etc. And from there, Batman the animated show and anything animated or cartoony, times where Roy and I would just either of our houses just comic books, and we would read read random bits here and comment on, and we would quiz each other on what's this character's real identity and what was this one's origin story. And yeah, those are just honest to God, like this here, genuine good times. No pretense, no ulterior motive, just love and joy of comic books. And someone that you could share the story with, your interpretation of the story and what happened, their interpretation, how it affected them, how it affected you. Yeah, and then both of us ended up working for a local comic store in Edenvale. Then Roy worked a lot in the video store. I was working in the comic store. And that's where my other passion, let me backtrack a bit maybe. As a kid, my parents bought me tons of action figures, like you. I had He-Mans, Brave Stars, G.I. Joes, and G.I. Joe, I don't know why, for me that was my shit. I just loved those fucking things. And at one point, I think it was as I was starting high school, parents convinced me to donate toys to the less privileged kids. And
As you do.
100%. And I thought that was an amazing thing. Give these things to these kids and hopefully they find the same pleasure.
Passion you did, yeah.
Exactly. That was the whole motivation. And I'll be honest with you, yeah, there was a lot of regret post doing it. And as one day happened past toy store or something, there were those X-Men figures in the window from the cartoon show. There was a Wolverine, and that's what sparked off my action figure hunting passion. It was I want it. it's my money, and I'm gonna get it. And that from there, the action figure collecting started. So I don't think it's too dissimilar from what you're saying. I think for me, the key thing that you mentioned was there was this Gambit character, and maybe not the most powerful character out of all the guys, but something there, the way he looked, the way he moved, things he did hooked you. The aesthetic hooked you. Same thing for me with Wolverine. And I often hear people, old school fans, modern day fans that are watching movies, series, whatever, there's something about the aesthetic of a character, the look, like in a Daredevil show when the majority are loving the Daredevil character, and then out of left field comes the Punisher, and there's a small group of people that go, we don't know why, but that Punisher character's cool.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because it might feel like I'm swinging topics a bit, but you'll see how it all ties in. Is that, so we just really quickly went through how we started loving stuff, and I even after that went through a phase, like when I was in my young teens and everything had to be dark, and it was Frank Miller and Dark Knight and Sin City and 300, and it's just because it's so gritty. And there's a part of me that will still always love all that, but it was not shortly, but a while after that I got entrenched in the community, and I was met with resistance first. Who's this kid, thinks he knows everything, and I don't. He's easier wannabe and stuff. And the reason I bring that up is, you and I have plenty on the. I think we're guilty of this on the groups and stuff, where some dude comes in and he's like, I'm the biggest Deadpool fan, and you just watched Deadpool, and now you.
There's a little bit of cynicism straight away off the bat from
I
us.
had this thought the other day, and I know we've talked about it, but a very specific thought came to me the other day, which is why I wanted to bring it up. Is if we look at how our generation, how we got into, again, we quite different generations, and we got into things differently. And still it organically went to comics and all this, and we have big love for the characters and stuff. And now these new kids are being born, they wake up and they turn on streaming, and it's Disney Plus. And if you look at it, there's no other way they're going to get exposed to it. There isn't those small little corner street cafes and stuff anymore.
Yeah, and we had Saturday morning cartoons where it was like a scheduled time, KTV or Nickelodeon or something like that.
So this is how they organically getting introduce these characters, whether their parents are like, cool, we want to go for a family thing and watch the new Marvel, new Avengers movie. Yeah. And then these kids grow up and they go into a comic book store, and maybe they go into a comic book store and they get brainwashed in, the whole like collecting and investing thing, and it just piles on and gets better and better for them. All these prospects of collecting is just such a good thing to them. And then they come to our group and we like, you stupid moron, like, what are you doing? Like, you're not the biggest Deadpool fan. And like,
sure,
we meet them with such a, like, this huge brick wall. And I understand that there's a different, there's someone that can come in really arrogant, someone that can come in really humble. They'll be treated accordingly. But I think sometimes they don't realize that. And the point I'm getting to is, are we not sort of, I don't know if cannibalizing is the right word, but we're destroying our own industry, because any new potential readers, even if 50% of them come in, it's eventually the comic book shops are going to feel it. We know that with all and we know we're seeing similar things to the 80s and 90s now, where they're printing too much. But if we keep putting people off and going, no, this is our industry, you're not allowed touching it, these are our characters, you're not allowed touching it, are we actually not sort of shooting ourselves in the foot?
I think you make a valid point, and just on face value, I think you're 100% right. We are. A few thoughts popped into my head as you were saying it. It's almost like art imitating life, or life imitating art, however you want to look at it. But if you look back to school days, that's exactly what happens. New kid comes into this clique of friends, and not always met with open arms reception. Sometimes it's I don't know if I trust this kid, or I don't like his look, or whatever it is, or here's a new guy, I think he's got the best skater, skateboard, or best moves, or whatever the case is. And that community, that clique, like you say, sometimes they are a bit receptive, sometimes they're not. And I think when it comes to this particular community, it was, maybe I'll reword what I'm saying, only recently has it become mainstream culture. Only recently has it in everything, all forms of media, merchandising like we've never ever seen. I mean, you mentioned it early on, you would struggle to get your hands on anything related to comic books, those characters, be it Marvel, DC, whomever. And now you struggle to find stuff that's not Marvel, correct. DC, or any of that thing. And I think at the core of it, that generation that were outcasts, that were not shunned, but certainly a lot of people just didn't get it. Yeah. Why do you like Star Wars? Or why Batman and that? And, oh, dude, you read comic books. Lame. That whole stigma that got attached to it, I think that community is quite protective over it. And if I just think back, I mean, just going through your teens, you have the jocks, the nerds, the goths, the emo kids. It's all these people that are just desperately trying to find a group to fit in with, to belong to. And the comic community in particular that I can speak from, it was shunned on or pushed aside, disregarded. And I think they are just naturally a little bit overprotective of it. Sometimes too much so. I mean, you can even look within the community and you get that Marvel versus DC rift.
Yeah.
Oh, I love DC. How can you read Marvel stuff, or vice versa?
Yeah, that seems to be everything in life.
Exactly
BMW
right.
Versus Merc,
I think as human beings, it's in our DNA. Not conflict per se, but certainly we like competition. It's why sports is still so relevant today. It's why gladiators all the way back in Rome resonated with us, because we don't just capitulate. You know, you put an obstacle in front of us, and it's human nature to want to overcome best that obstacle, better yourself, better the people around you. So even within the community, guys, having those kinds of battles, fights, be it on social media with all kinds of weird Twitter comments and feeds, right the way down to face within a comic book store. You know, one guy on the one side of the table, one guy on the other, flailing their comics around and going, what are you thinking? There's no way Superman would ever be taken out by whomever. Yeah, exactly. The thing that I do love about that, and maybe onto your point, what everybody needs to be a little bit more aware or mindful of, is the passion is amazing. The passion for that thing and the wanting to protect it and defend it is amazing. Maybe how we channel it and who we channel it at is the most important thing. You know, you certainly don't want big corporate Hollywood, whatever you want to say, to take this thing that you hold so dear and destroy it, bastardize it, chop it up into little pieces and dilute it. But you definitely do want the curious person off the street to be able to come in and not feel outcasted, not feel rejected. Not everyone can open these, come here, and hugs and kisses and you're one of us now, but certainly not reject them. Let them.
And I think what further complicates the comics specifically thing is, you know, you get people that are just, they read it as a kid, now they're trying to get the runs again. Then you get someone who's like just into art, you know, like the art to them is just phenomenal, and they'll collect stuff just based off that. Then it's story arcs, and then it's the key collector, which is, you know, it's not new, but it's relatively new, especially with the rise of all the movies and all that. You know,
well, you say that, but I think it started back in the 90s. There's lots of YouTube documentaries and stuff like that where that first Action Comics went on sale, clapped a couple million for the person who sold it, and suddenly everyone was like, oh my God, this is a viable, I've got old comics, I'm sure I can capitalize on them too. And the industry, there's lots of other guys who've commented on it. It boomed, then it crashed and slowly rebuilt itself, and now we're kind of back there again. The key collectors, not just on the old comics, but now, like you were saying, variant covers. 1 in 5,000 cover of this by J. Scott Campbell or whomever. And I think that I cut you off and I apologize, but what the point I wanted to make was greed starts to come in there. And greed starts to become the barrier for a prospective new person to come in, because there's someone there who's got this perceived rare item, wants to make not just a quick buck, but a lot of quick bucks off a new, innocent, unsuspecting person, takes them to the ringer. They think that, you know, enough of these and they can retire off comics. And
100%, yeah.
that's a pretty bad place to be.
Yeah, and it's pretty sad.
Yeah, 100%, because I think you've lost count. I've certainly lost count of the amount of people that we've crossed paths with, not just collecting comic books, statues, action figures, whatever. And in some way, shape, or form, they've come across people that have taken them for a ride because they didn't know any better, because they were new, naive. And all I can say to anybody out there is we did it as kids, either well or forced upon us, but do your damn homework. I think now more than ever, we have access to information like we've never had, of Google and the internet. And, you know, if you're interested in something, you see something that you want and like, do your homework. Yeah. Go, just type in searches, try and get as much information on that item as possible to say, I am getting ripped off here because the general consensus is this thing is worth X, versus, just taking it blindly, loving it, cherishing it, and then only to find out further down the line, well, this is not exactly what I thought it was.
Yeah, definitely.
And it also goes to that concept that you and I often talk about, that willing buyer, willing seller concept of, this industry, comics, collecting of anything, it becomes almost like a weird drug and an addiction. And when you're looking for something that you often hear people, the grail, this is my holy grail, I need this above everything else, you tend to not think as clearly, and you get kind of like blinded by the haze of owning it, and you sometimes can make those stupid decisions. Or the opposite is people hounding other people for this thing, like, man, I need this desperately, I'll pay you like double what it's worth, I'll pay you triple what it's worth, because I must own that particular thing. And then
there's the other problem of just us being in South Africa, the other side of the world, where most of the print runs are American or UK prints.
Oh, so, for those of you that couldn't tell by the accents, not Australian, not New Zealand, not British either. Both of us are from wee little South Africa.
sunny South Africa.
Yeah, sunny South Africa, man. And you're right. Being in the what most people would consider to be one of the most remote parts of the world, Africa, it is tough to get that kind of stuff out here. It is tough. And I think in South Africa and a few other African countries, it's uniquely weird because we have awesome, readily available access to the internet, to apps, smartphones, and you get an Amazon app, you get a Diamond app, you get a Marvel, a DC, and you see what's coming, and just to get hold of what is coming is sometimes a challenge. Not all the local stores here, and there aren't many, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And you have certainly seen that of late around the world. Not many. They're reducing and dwindling, and that in and of itself is quite sad to see or hear about a comic store that's been around for 20 years suddenly just not there, gone. Yeah. It's an evolving industry, and going back to something you were saying earlier, I don't know if it's evolving for the better, for the worse. We just have to be quite careful and protective of it and all the elements of it, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.